The morning light was soft and pale when the millionaire Richard Vaughn stepped out onto the balcony of his grand white mansion that rested on the edge of the city. He gazed down at the trimmed gardens and the wide driveway glistening faintly. From the rain that had fallen all night, it was a morning like many others, yet somehow something in the air felt heavy, a weight that pressed softly against his thoughts. He sipped his black coffee, slowly letting its bitter warmth stir him awake. From the far corner of the estate, he could faintly see a small figure moving about near the servant quarters. It was his maid Eliza, a quiet woman who had worked for him for nearly 5 years. She never spoke much and rarely met his eyes. Her presence was humble and almost invisible, yet the house always seemed cleaner, calmer, more alive when she was around. She never complained about the long hours or the endless tasks. She just worked silently and disappeared into the background once her duties were done. Richard had never truly noticed her. Before, not in the way one notices a person, he saw her as part of the house, part of the daily rhythm of polished floors and folded linen. But that morning, as he stood watching her from afar, something about her caught his attention. She was sitting outside on a small wooden bench beneath the pouring rain, her old blue uniform soaked completely through in her hands. She held a small metal lunchbox. She opened it carefully, shielding it from the rain with her arm, and began to eat slowly, mechanically, as though each bite was both a comfort and a burden. Richard frowned. The sight made no sense. There was a kitchen indoors, there was warmth and shelter. Why would she choose to sit in the cold? Rain curiosity took hold of him, and he set his cup aside. Walking down the marble steps through the garden and toward the servant quarters, his expensive shoes sank slightly into the wet ground, but he hardly noticed the rain had grown heavier forming, a silver curtain around them. When he finally reached her, she didn't see him. At first, she was hunched forward, her dark hair clinging to her face and neck, her lunchbox trembling slightly in her hands as if she were shivering. He stood there watching, her uncertain whether to speak or turn back. His voice came out softer than he expected. "Eliza, why are you sitting out here in the rain?" She startled her hands, closing the lunchbox quickly as she rose to her feet, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Sir, I am sorry," she said. "I didn't think anyone would see me. I will go back to work immediately." But Richard shook his head, his curiosity deepening. He could not ignore the strange sadness in her tone. He asked again, "Why here and not inside?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then slowly she looked toward the house, her eyes distant and heavy with something he could not name. "Because, sir," she whispered softly, "it is the only place where I can eat in peace." The answer struck him in a way he could not explain. There was something in her voice, something raw and tired that lingered even after she turned away, clutching her lunchbox and hurrying back toward the servants' corridor, leaving him standing there beneath the relentless rain, wondering what truth lay behind her words. The rain had stopped by afternoon, but the image of Eliza sitting alone beneath its cold curtain remained etched in Richard's mind. All through the day he tried to shake it off, focusing on his meetings, his calls, his endless stream of business decisions, yet every quiet moment brought her face back to him. Pale, tired, and hidden beneath wet strands of hair, her words echoed like a faint hum. "It is the only place where I can eat in peace." That night, he found himself walking through the quiet hallways of the mansion, unable to rest. The lights were dim, and the sound of the wind pressed gently against the tall windows. He paused outside the kitchen. The faint clinking of dishes reached his ears. Eliza was still, working cleaning after everyone else had gone to sleep. She always stayed the longest, finishing every last corner of the place before retreating to her small room at the far end of the corridor. Richard stepped inside quietly. She didn't notice him. At first, she was bent over the sink, scrubbing a large pot, her thin arms moving with tired precision. He spoke softly. "Eliza, do you live here alone?" She turned, startled again, eyes wide but softer this time. "Yes, sir. I stay in the room behind the pantry," she replied, her voice low and hesitant. He nodded for a moment, unsure what to say. He wanted to ask more, but he could see the exhaustion in her movements and felt that pressing her would be cruel. So he simply said, "Thank you for your hard work." She gave a small, uncertain smile, then returned to cleaning. Later that night, Richard sat in his study surrounded by silence and memory. He remembered the years that had built his fortune, the relentless drive, the choices that had given him wealth. But taken something else from him, he realized he had never thought about the people who kept his world running, the hands that worked unseen. He decided he needed to know more about the quiet woman who ate in the rain. The next morning he spoke. With the head housekeeper asking what she knew about Eliza, the woman hesitated before answering. "Sir, she came here 5 years ago. She was looking for any kind of work. We gave her a chance. She has never asked for a raise or a day off. She sends most of her pay somewhere every month, I think, to her family." Richard felt the question rising before he could stop it. "Where is her family?" The housekeeper sighed. "A small town far from here, sir. I heard she has a son who is sick, and her husband left. Long ago, she barely earns enough to send medicine. That is why she eats alone. She doesn't want anyone to see that she has so little. She saves everything." Those words cut through him sharper than he expected. He could see her again in the rain, clutching her lunchbox, protecting each bite like it was something sacred, while he stood warm and dry behind walls of glass, and marble guilt rose in him like a tide. He had built his world on comfort and control, but now he felt powerless in front of a quiet truth that stripped all his success bare. He decided that night he would find a way to help her, but not with pity, with respect. The next morning, Richard woke before sunrise. The sky was pale and misty, and the gardens glistened with fresh dew. He moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake anyone. He found Eliza in the servants' quarters, already preparing breakfast. Her movements were slow and methodical, her eyes focused on her work as if the world outside did not exist. He paused. At the doorway, unsure how to approach her this time, he carried no questions, only an invitation. "Eliza," he said softly. She looked up, startled, her eyes wide as she saw him standing there. He held out an envelope. She hesitated but took it. His hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a sum of money enough to cover months of her son's treatment, and a note written carefully for her eyes only. He told her that she need not fear embarrassment or shame, that she had worked hard and deserved support, that he wanted her to use it to care for herself and her son. She stared at him, speechless, tears forming slowly in her eyes. She could not speak, the weight of unspoken burdens pressing down for years. Finally lifted her lips, quivered, and she shook her head in disbelief. He smiled softly and said, "You do not have to eat alone in the rain anymore. You deserve warmth and comfort like everyone else." Over the following weeks, Richard observed subtle changes. He noticed how she moved more freely, how she lingered longer at the windows, watching the world outside, without fear or exhaustion, how she laughed softly to herself when she thought no one was watching. He arranged medical care for her son and visited occasionally, leaving flowers and small gifts of comfort that she would never accept outright, but quietly place in the corner of her room to use when needed. The bond between them grew quietly, without words or declarations. It was marked by understanding and respect, and the silent acknowledgement of struggle and perseverance. One evening, as Richard walked through the gardens, he saw Eliza sitting on a bench, this time under the soft glow of lanterns, and a light blanket around her shoulders. She was eating, but not alone. She had spread a small tablecloth and invited other servants to share in the meal. The rain had stopped entirely, and the air was warm. The sight struck him in a way he had never imagined. The small act of dignity and togetherness mirrored the change. In both their hearts, he realized wealth was never meant to isolate. It was meant to protect and nurture, and that even the smallest gesture of understanding could transform a life. Eliza looked up at him and smiled a full smile this time, unguarded and genuine. Richard nodded quietly, knowing that some moments did not require words. It was enough to witness her relief and the quiet triumph of human spirit that no amount of money could ever buy. He turned away slowly, allowing her the space to enjoy her meal in peace. In the weeks and months that followed, he continued to support her without fanfare, letting her live with the dignity she had earned. Slowly, the mansion no longer felt like a fortress of cold marble and glass, but a place of subtle kindness and warmth, a place where people could breathe and heal, and where even the quietest voices could be heard. And in that realization, Richard found something he had never truly possessed, before a deep understanding that true wealth was not measured in numbers,